And welcome back, everybody, once again to the Real Results Podcast. This is your host, as always, Mr. Rich Hill. Thank you, one and all, for joining us here today. All of our Real Resultians, or Real Resultonians, or Real Resultites. You know, we're still working on that side of things, but thank you so much for following us along, whether this is your first episode or if you've been with us since the beginning. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us here today. And I say us here today because I do have a special guest, which I'll introduce in just a second. But really quickly, again, if you're listening to this podcast on any platform, make sure you pick your favorite one. And that can be either Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you like to find your podcast providers from there. Make sure that you subscribe us, give us a like, give us a share to any one of your friends. We're really here to help you and everyone you know see real results. So with that being said, and once again, before I'm kind of teasing our guest here. He's just waiting to jump in here. But make sure that you follow everything that we're doing here at 360 Fitness online. You can find us, of course, at 360fitness.ca. You can find us on Facebook under 360 Fitness Personal Training, either Red Deer or Sherwood Park. You can find us on Twitter at 360FitnessRD and at 360FitnessSP. You can find us on Instagram as well. So you have 360fitness.shpk for our Sherwood Park location and at 360fitnesspt as our regular main account there. You can follow your host with the most on Instagram it's at rshill_fitness and on Twitter at rs_hill. And without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our special guest, the one and only Jack Wheeler. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for helping me out here today.
Thanks. And good intro again. I would have to write that down 6 times.
Well, when you do it 30 times, you have 30 times of edited versions.
That's right.
Including probably the 60 to 100 that are in the scrap heap.
Yeah.
You get to be a little bit better at it.
Well, good work. Happy to be here.
It's usually the outro I have problems with.
That's fair. That's fair.
Stay tuned there. So today we are going to sit down and we're going to chat a little bit about different types of diets, different types of nutritional approaches that we have. Because as we know, there's a lot of information out in the world, whether you're looking up online, whether you're being told by a friend, family member, or even a professional coach, nutritionist. Really what we wanted to do here today is not just say like, this is great and this is crap, or this is great and this is not so great. We want to really look at it as shades of gray, because all of these approaches really have pros and cons to them. There's things that obviously work, otherwise these wouldn't be sticking around. But there's also cons to it that we really don't think about, or at least we have to think about as we're getting into it. You know, as these diets have become bigger and bigger in our life, as people are becoming more health conscious, you know, people kind of jump into these nutrition plans without really a good understanding of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and really, when it comes down to it, making sure that it's part of a lifestyle rather than just that quick fix.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And like, all diets work to a certain extent if you work the diet. So if that diet matches your lifestyle and your goals, wonderful, right? And a lot of times people try to, I guess, put themselves into a diet and into a program because it's worked for somebody else, where they haven't looked at the pros and cons and they haven't looked at what the variables are that it's going to suit their lifestyle. So I love that we're talking about the pros and cons and not just which one people should follow, because every single diet out there works for at least one person, right? Yep. And if you can really understand the variables of it, you can understand the pros and cons and how it suits and how it fandangles around your lifestyle, it's a win-win. And I like too is that most fitness studios or programs or businesses or whatever are usually one camp, right? So it'd be, hey, we're paleo here, or we're keto here, or we're Whole30. They try to identify with one camp. Yep. Or one thing I really like about 360 is that we customize it based on them and then give them certain types of diets based on what their lifestyle goals are. And that's what we found over 10 plus years of doing this, and that it works. I'm glad that we're doing pros and cons and not just this way or the highway, which I think a lot of platforms and avenues are going down that route, and it's harming the industry and it's harming people's fitness results when it comes down to it.
And it vilifies things unnecessarily, right? It makes one side of things look bad, where it's like, well, my side of things is the smart way to do it, and your way is wrong, and all of that kind of nonsense. And again, like every time we have a new person coming in, we're talking to them about, nutrition being the hardest thing, right?
Yep.
A lot of it is to do with the mentality as we're going into it. That's a whole other podcast. I believe we actually did one. I'd have to look back at that. I don't even remember what we've done it already. But, it's almost like a choose your own adventure story, right? Because there's 100 different ways that you could go nutritionally, and they're all going to get you to the same area. Mm-hmm. But you have to find the way that works best for you. Otherwise, you're just going to go around in a circle, and then you're going to try another one. And then you're going to go around in a circle, and you're going to try another one.
Yep.
So that's really why we want to do this, is just to open people's eyes up, open people's minds up. And again, like you mentioned, we don't want to vilify anything. We want to make sure that the camps are being represented well. Mm-hmm. And we're not just painting it as black and white here. It's not just, okay, this works and this doesn't, but we can really go into what are some good things about maybe some diets that people have thought aren't so great. Yep. But we can also go into some cons that are, part of our normal diet.
Exactly. So, and then this is great too, because me and you I've done all these diets we're going to talk about. I think you have as well. At least part of them. But
we've done about 2 out of the 4 main ones we've talked about.
So I've done all of them plus more. We've had clients, we've had fellow coaches, we've had friends, family. We've had tangible evidence behind this, plus studies, plus academic papers. So we're bringing in personal experiences, social circle experiences, the gym experiences, plus academia into this, which is good because we're kind of coming at it from all avenues. I think first off, we should talk about the universal truths behind diets. What makes a diet work?
Yeah, for sure.
So it doesn't matter. So the diets we're going to be talking about today, and then maybe some more if we get chatty, is intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet or keto, and the Paleolithic or the paleo diet. Those are the main 3 we're going to talk about today, plus calorie timing. But the universal truths behind those is all of those will work if you hit a certain amount of parameters. First and foremost, if you're hitting the calorie goals assigned to you based on your goals, and based on your basal metabolic rates and lean body mass and all your other personal factors. Yeah. So as long as you're hitting your calorie goals, after that, most of it's semantics. The second thing is if it's giving you a balanced nutrition profile. So if you're eating good whole foods, that's a good thing. And if it allows you to live your lifestyle to make it sustainable. Win-win. If you can achieve those 3 big universal truths with any diet, more often than not, that one's going to work for you in particular. So if one allows you to hit your calorie goals and one gives you the good whole foods in your diet, but it's not sustainable for you, don't do it. Or if one's super sustainable but doesn't allow you to eat whole foods, it's not going to work. You have to have all 3 of those covered, and it's unique for everybody. Yeah.
100%. And just add to that point, right? It's just bringing more attention to the food that we're eating.
Totally.
Regardless of what diet you do, it's just bringing attention to the food that you're eating.
Yes.
So we can be more mindful, right? Whether that's cutting out things, whether that's adding things in, whether that's reducing certain areas. A lot of these diets have these restrictions, but those restrictions are there so that you are more mindful of what you're eating.
Yep.
And that's really what it comes down to in the long run, is we just want to make sure that we know what we're putting in our body and being aware of that versus just kind of going in with blinders on thinking that we're doing great when we might not be doing so hot. Right. So let's skip this foreplay, if you shall.
There you go.
And let's start diving into some of these here. Cool. Kissing's over. Let's dive in and have a little fun with this.
Let's start off with intermittent fasting, IF. Okay, so let's start with the pros and cons of intermittent fasting. I've done this one. I think you've done this one. We've had clients, family, staff members. We've had some good experiences with it and some negative experiences with it. So again, we're always going to assume that all 3 diets are hitting those universal truths. It allows you to hit your calories. It's giving you real food. So it's not rabbit food or just garbage food or supplement based. It's actually real good food that's homemade and home cooked. And it also allows you to hit your lifestyle factor. For me, for personal experiences, I like the pro that intermittent fasting allows me to go into a calorie deficit in an easier frame because I'm more or less skipping 1 to 2 meals, and it condenses my eating window. So I have less time to eat, and I usually am less prone to going over my calorie goals. So that is a pro for me, where intermittent fasting allows me to be in a calorie deficit more. If I was in the other camp and I wanted to gain lean body mass or to put on lean mass in any capacity, I think intermittent fasting would be difficult for me to get in a calorie surplus in a shortened window. And with intermittent fasting, really what we're talking about, guys, is reducing your eating window to a certain specific shorter time of the day, whether it's 8 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours, whatever you want, and then having a fasting period until the next feeding window. And we're not talking, liquid calories. We're talking no calories.
Yeah.
And we're talking, just water and sparkling water, maybe some tea.
Bone broth has been
bone broth, yeah. But it's having nil or close to nil calories for a sustained period of time to give your body a fasting window, and then feeding windows to have all your calories in a smaller time frame.
Yeah.
That's intermittent fasting. And there's intermittent different time windows. There's 16 and 8s, there's 20 and 4s, there's
there's
a whole bunch of
subsections to intermittent fasting as well, right? So there's some beliefs that fasting for a day every week, or fasting even for like 2 days a week. There's people that try to push it a little bit further as well.
Yep.
So some of the pros that go behind it, right, is it's great for insulin sensitivity.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So again, it just helps manage those insulin levels quite a bit. For males especially, it's a huge testosterone booster.
Yep.
And once you get past that initial 1 or 2 weeks, again, both scientifically and for personal experience, those cravings start to disappear.
Yep.
So you're not feeling hungry first thing in the morning. You're not starving by the time it's your fasting window. Your leptin levels start to come down to such a point, or your ghrelin, comes down to such a point that you don't have those cravings anymore.
Right.
And I guess another pro with it too is also food. You can really eat whatever you want during that time.
Yeah, as long as it's not super caloric dense foods and just garbage foods, you can have more or less a larger than normal diet, quote unquote, portion. So if you're only eating in 8 hours and your calorie goal is 2,000 calories, well, 2,000 calories over 3 meals or 2 snacks and a meal or whatever you want to do, but over 8 hours, 2,000 calories, that's very satisfying, right? If you can make it, it's good for that fulfillment and that satiety behind it. Now, a lot of times people, if they're always forgetting to eat, or they're I didn't bring food, so I have to go to the convenience store or drive through or anything else. Shift workers, this is a great opportunity for them to not feel stressed about having to have such a large feeding window open where they have to carry food and snacks and that kind of stuff with them, or have it all laid out for them. So I like it is that it reduces the feeding window, so it takes off the stress of having to plan 24 hours of feeding around. And I also really like it too is that we've been really, not brainwashed, but really pressured into thinking that everybody has to have breakfast at no matter what. Yeah. So you have to kickstart your metabolism, this and that and whatever else, and it has to be there's half yeses and half nos behind it, but it doesn't work for everybody. Exactly. Now we have a lot of clients that work out with us at 6 in the morning, 5:30, 6:30 in the morning, and to them to get a big meal in, it's causing them actually work out negativities, where for intermittent fasting, it allows them to come up, wake up, have a cup of coffee, come to the gym, have a great workout. They don't have to worry about digestion issues, and then they can go on to their day. That's really nice because it skips that time frame. They have that time frame for working out, and then they can eat a little bit later on in the day. And there's also people like myself is that I don't feel very good off of a larger breakfast or any breakfast. I like to wake up, have liquids only for 5 to 6, even to 7 hours after I wake. It allows me to wake up better. I'm less sluggish. I'm more alert. I'm just more attentive first thing in the morning. Where others, my fiance is I need to have breakfast or else I can't function. Yeah. Well, that's
a little bit more like me too.
Yeah, right. And that's the great thing about it is we'll frame our nutrition patterns around our lifestyle and actually how we feel. But I do intermittent fasting Monday through Friday because it allows me to have that, and I like to nighttime eat, where it gives me more freedom and flexibility to have those larger calorie amounts at night, where I don't have to feel like I'm just eating rabbit food and carrots for the 15,000th time. So again, pro is what we're talking about. It reduces your feeding window, so it allows you to have more satisfaction in your meals. I have no stress of having to spread out my meals throughout the day. I don't have to make another meal a week. That's a big thing too, right? So I'm saving that time. And I find for me, when I'm in a burn fat phase, calorie deficit phase, whatever you want to call it, it allows me to get into a calorie deficit with more ease because I'm not worried about going over my calories at the end of the night. I'm actually trying to get more in.
Yeah.
So that's a pro. So that's kind of a more of a personal pro, and kind of where I've seen a lot of clients succeeded. But that's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I kind of mentioned there, just with the hormonal side of things, there's plenty of hormonal benefits to intermittent fasting as well. Not just with aiding digestion, but with the testosterone side of things. Sometimes it's affected people's sleep again, depending on which. Again, there's a lot of conflicting studies, and that's why we're doing this. But
that's great.
Sleep is one of the benefits, as well as recovery post time. And it's just been shown to help a lot with not just the mentality behind eating throughout the day, but also a little bit on the hormonal side of things, which is always nice as well.
I'd like to bring up that insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance again. So what Rich is talking about with this is like how well you respond to insulin, produce it, absorb it, use it, and excrete it and get it out. Insulin is fantastic for us as an energy source, as a conversion source and we want it in, used, and then out. We don't want it to linger around and stay around. We want insulin to come in, do its job, do its thing, go away. And a lot of times if we have a grazing diet where we're constantly eating every 2 to 3 hours, insulin doesn't have time to come in, do its job, and then leave. It's kind of like peaking, coming back down, and then peaking again. Slowly coming down and peaking again. So it never gets down to baseline levels. Yeah. And that can throw that hormone out of whack, plus a cacophony of others.
We could go into a whole podcast about insulin.
Now, there's people that are insulin sensitive where the insulin doesn't come in and go, not like normally, normal amounts. And if you're lingering with that insulin kind of bouncing up and down, intermittent fasting has been proven to, or has at least put us in a frame of mind that if you can delay your eating windows, give yourselves more time for that insulin to come down, reset, and settle, and then give you an opportunity to have more insulin later, it's good.
And also, obviously, the idea behind that as well is when you don't have those sugars, your body's going to convert body fat more into
fatty acids.
Fatty acids, and then convert that into glucose for us longer term as we go. But let's go into some of the cons here for intermittent fasting. Like, I'll let you kind of take the lead here with the cons, and then I'll kind of chime in with my 2 cents.
I'm going to go for personal on this one first. It's easy to relate on that one. If I want to shoot for a calorie surplus and do a intermittent fasting window, it's hard for me to get good quality calorie surplus in.
That's fair.
It's easy to eat a Big Mac and fries, right, and get 3,000 calories in real quick. But if I have an 8-hour feeding window, for instance, it's really difficult for me to have 3 or 4 meals and hit 25 or 3,000 calories of good quality food. That's when I get sluggish. That's when I get lethargic. That's when everything goes out of whack. And then when I'm not in my feeding window, I'm hungry again. So it works for me on a personal level if I'm in maintenance or deficit. But if I have to eat more, it's kind of counterintuitive. Where I'd rather kind of graze and spread out my calories that way. Now, the cons behind that too is that first and foremost, if you do not have the willpower and the discipline and you don't understand the process behind it, it can feel like it's like an on or off diet, and that you're being restricted, or that you are being like withheld. I don't know how to say that, but it'll feel like you're being restricted.
You're basically told not to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
When we're told not to do something mentally, we want to do it.
Exactly.
Rebellious people.
Yeah. So if you don't have the willpower or like the understanding of the process, it's going to be really difficult for you because you're constantly going to feel like, oh, I'm so hungry. And then you're going to be so full, and then there won't be a happy medium in there. And that you're either going to feel like, oh, I'm starving, or I'm way too full for my own good. And if you understand the process more, you'll realize like, no, it's not that way at all. But if you feel like it's a negative in your fasting window, you're not really going to do all that well off of it.
No, absolutely. And that was something I was going to mention as something people need to be aware of before doing an intermittent fasting diet, is that you don't just pick random hours. You're not just fasting because you're busy that day.
Right.
It's not a one-day situation. This has to be like a consistent effort to making sure that you are fasting for, let's say, or you're eating for 8 hours and you're fasting for, math is tough, let's say 16 hours. I think that's what that equates
you got
to.
it. Yep.
Math is really tough for me.
We count to 8 and that's it.
I use my fingers for pretty much everything. But so if we're going on that, we have to kind of commit to that, right? We can't just kind of play around and be like, oh, well, we're doing 8 hours on Monday, but we're going to do 6 hours tomorrow, and then, oh, well, I had breakfast today. It's not something you just turn on and off, right?
Yep.
Consistency is going to be key. Like, you have to be able to stick to this for a significant time to actually see the benefits. Because if you're fasting for a few hours, but then the next day you're not fasting at all, there's no benefit to it, right? Your body
You just skip the meal.
It's your body responding to different things, right? Our body needs to be able to adapt to what we're doing.
Yep.
And if we do it for a short amount of time, like a very acute time where it's like, hey, we're doing this for 2 or 3 days, or we're doing this for a week, it's not going to make those changes, right? It's just going to be like, oh, business as usual. And that's why we usually feel super hungry those first couple of weeks of intermittent fasting. It's because we're so used to eating, trying to eat 5-6 meals a day that we don't have that willpower.
Yep.
So once we can get past that, and once we can build consistency, that's always going to be something that we need to do.
Yeah, and again, like if we're considering all the diets having those universal truths, right? And if that third parameter, if it's not sustainable for your life, IF, intermittent fasting, whatever you want to call it, is not going to work for you.
Yeah.
And if you try intermittent fasting and your body is giving you all the signs that it's not working, you have to listen. And of course, it's going to be like a little bit of putting you through the ringer for the first 3 to 4 days. But if your workout performance is low, if you're sluggish, if you're lethargic, if your mood is erratic, if your energy levels are peak and
muscle mass starts to decrease if you're doing like a body composition analysis.
Yep. So that's definitely a con that way. And then another con is that protein is pretty hard to break down, and protein synthesis has to be with other macronutrients. And I find that a lot of our guys that, especially our male clients, the ones that are looking to build lean mass, it's difficult for them to get their adequate protein intake in without using supplements. So if they're trying to get, let's say a 200-pound guy, he's trying to get 200 grams of protein in an 8-hour window, it's very difficult,
right? And very bloated, very gassy.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a joy to be around.
Yeah, and it's difficult for them to get their protein intake in without using whey or pea or egg protein or whatever a supplement is. But again, that leads to a whole bunch of different issues too if they're having too much of that.
And if that's a male client, just imagine for the females listening, right? If you're trying to put on lean mass, like that becomes significantly harder.
Yep.
Because again, you getting that amount of protein is tough, and building lean mass is very, very difficult.
Yep.
So we could talk about these things all day.
Yeah, we got to keep
we've taken pre-workout. We're already jittery. We're already talking like crazy. We're 20 minutes in already. But let's get through a couple of these before we get to kind of the hour marker here. Let's try to keep this within 40 minutes. But let's go on to the keto diet. So this is a very, very popular diet nowadays. Keto diet is basically a extreme reduction in carbohydrate intake.
Yep.
The idea is that, again, it comes down to that insulin sensitivity we were talking about before, right? It's basically removing that and making sure that our body is converting fat into ketones for our energies, right? And utilizing that for our energy stores.
Yep.
So I'll let you take the lead here again.
Sure. Kind of like frame it around like a ketogenic diet it's the whole science behind this is allowing your body to get into ketosis and stay there over a long period of time. Ketosis is just, again, exactly like you nailed it, is using ketones as our primary fuel source instead of glucose. Where proteins and carbohydrates would convert into glucose, that would be a primary fuel source. We're switching from unleaded gas to diesel. We're just switching fuel sources. And one is not going to give us more or less or whatever. We're switching fuel sources. Now, entering ketosis is simple but difficult at the same time to get into. It's different for every single person, first and foremost. And usually your body has to be very, very adept to using ketones, but also getting glucose in and out real quick. So for me, I need to be anywhere between under 50 grams of carbohydrates a day to enter ketosis. Pretty easy. Where I've seen people enter it less than 100. I've had to have other people get less than 20. And when we're talking about grams of carbohydrates, that's a combination of fibrous carbs and starchy carbs. Yeah. So it's difficult too, is that you need to reduce the amount of fruits and vegetables in your diet to a certain extent. So that, again, a pro and a con kind of thing. But we can talk about cons later. But if we're kind of talking about the overview of a ketogenic diet, it's using ketones as your primary fuel source instead of glucose. So it's having more of a fat-centric diet where fat will take up the majority of your caloric intake, whether it's 50%, 55, 60, 65, 70, having protein in adequate amounts of like 20 to 30%, and then carbs as the last but not least guy, kind of 5 to 15%.
Yeah. And
again, the amount of grams is dependent on how many calories you have, and how many calories is dependent on the person. So these numbers are not universal.
Yeah, and that's kind of like it's a big fish hole we could go down another time for those.
Yep.
But like, let's get into a little bit of the pros here for ketogenic. Like, what do you see as a pro? What are some of the bonuses of doing keto?
For the clients and for personal, I've done ketogenic before too, and like even the old anabolic diet and stuff. I really like
Atkins too, that kind of thing. There, I think,
Atkins is like lower carbs, but still like you can have them, but it's just controlling your carbs, which is still a good thing. But ketogenic, I found I have a lot of satisfaction off my meals because they're higher fat contents. I had a lot of satiety. I had a lot of like
always tastes good.
Yeah, exactly. And I can have like the foods that I like: eggs, bacon, fattier meats,
chicken, beef,
exactly, that kind of stuff. So I thrive off those foods, and I feel good. I have good energies off of them, so it's an easy kind of swap that way. That's a pro, is that you get a lot of satisfaction from your meals, and I like smaller meals where fat is more calorie dense. It's 9 calories per gram versus 4 and 4 for fats proteins and carbs.
Yeah.
So your serving size, if you say like a plate, it's going to typically contain twice as many calories in that same volume.
Right? It makes it quicker to eat. And more
exactly.
For people.
Yeah. So when I was first personal training, like you eat on the floor, and it's easy, quick. It's in and in, and it was like eggs and beef mixed together with olive oil. I was like, perfect. There you go. But it was 5 or 6 bites. You're 300 or 400 calories in. You're good to go. I found that as a pro, and you don't have to like sacrifice a lot of the foods that I like. The chicken wings and the beef and the eggs and the buffalo and that kind of, like, I really like fat and
cheese,
meat and
bacon,
exactly. So
nuts,
that's a pro. It's some of like the cheat foods or restricted foods or whatever you want to call it. They're included in this diet. You can. Yeah. Now, a lot of times too, people get very carried away with it. With ketogenic. Let's talk about cons. Another thing. But for pros, it's a simple diet to follow.
Yeah.
It's very simple, but you have to be very, very strict with it. Pros.
I would say that you actually get very great results with it in not a lot of time.
Fair. Yeah.
So people can see mass amounts of weight loss. Like people, I've seen and heard people losing 20 to 40 pounds in like a 3 to 4 month time frame, like 10 pounds, and just melting off, right? But again, it's kind of going back to what we were talking about before, just paying attention to the foods that we're eating.
Totally.
If we're eating a ton of chips, pretzels, a lot of high starchy foods, right?
Yeah.
Where it brings that attention back to it, and now you have to pay attention to what you were talking about before: the grams of protein, the grams of fat, the grams of carbohydrates we're taking in. So it's really reducing it to a point that you can pay attention to the food that you're taking in to see more immediate results, because again, there's that restriction, there's that guidance.
Right, and that was another pro. Good, thank you for bringing that up. Is that I found with the ketogenic diet is that I made my snacks better. I had better options for snacks. Yeah. And ketogenic foods, again, it's simple, but it's less convenient, right? You can't just like grab a bag of chips or this or that or little snacks along the way. You have to prep and cook things in advance. That's what I found. Yeah. And it allowed me to avoid the bad stuff because I knew I couldn't. So there wasn't like a small little window to get that in, because if you have one chip, you're going to have a bag of chips.
Yeah.
And that's just,
we know how that goes.
That's how I do too, is like I need to have a left or a right.
It's carbohydrates, which are quick to break down, and it's oil, which our body really enjoys, and it's salt, which our body also really enjoys.
Exactly. And I found that it just helped me, again, like I overeat on a lot of that junk stuff, right? So I can't have super small amounts. It's either all or nothing for me, and that's something we all go through in different struggles. And for this, it just allowed me to just have a no to certain things. So it's like, no, that's not going to match the diet, so I'm not even going to try. And it just allowed me to have that freedom of, I need to go this direction. I can't even attempt to go that one or try it. That's a pro.
Let's go into some cons then. Let's keep this ball rolling.
Cons, you have to drastically lower your carbohydrate intake.
Yeah,
and we're not trying to like carbs aren't the devil. Bad carbs suck, right? But same thing with crappy proteins and crappy fats. It's like all macronutrients have their place and they have their purpose. And if you're going to vastly and drastically restrict one macronutrient entirely, you have to be careful. You have to be very, very careful. And when a lot of these diets, when it comes down to it, they're restricting or elevating one certain macronutrient or a certain profile at one time. So you have to do your homework on it. And you have to know why, and you have to understand the purpose and how you can adjust your food to make up for the lack of that one macronutrient. So when you're in a ketogenic diet, you are dramatically decreasing your carbohydrates. And we're talking about fruits, veggies, and starches too. So we have to make sure that we're still getting enough micronutrients in, and we're still getting a good nutrient profile. We can't have the perfect health of just eating eggs and bacon and fatty meats all day. Yeah. There is going to be some cons to that. And you have to supplement a lot of the times too with micronutrients, multivitamins, individual vitamins, that kind of thing.
Bone broth people are using as well to get electrolytes in.
Yeah, you got it. So you have to understand the process, and you have to really track your food to find out what you are lacking and missing, and being able to identify your symptoms, I guess, and find out, okay, this is how I'm feeling. These are my reactions and responses, so I have to supplement in here. Yeah. Another negative too is that with these fatty foods, you have to be very, very cholesterol with very you have to be very careful with cholesterol. You have to make sure that your family history doesn't, play a part in here, and also like you're not just having fatty, gross, negative foods all day. Yeah. Right. So there's a place for everything, and it doesn't mean that you can just have processed fatty garbage all day.
You need to get some omega-3s in. You need to make sure that you're getting plant-based fats. Yep. There's a lot to it that people, again, you look at it like, hey, cheese and bacon, I can do this all day. Yep. But it's not just that, right? Yep. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're getting other nutrients in. Another thing that you brought up with our previous point as well for intermittent fasting is that these are very dense foods that we're eating. So it becomes very hard on the digestive system sometimes to be consuming this amount of food and this amount of calories, right? You can get away from your calorie goal very, very easily if you're not careful, if you're not tracking kind of what you're doing on a daily basis, right? So again, it's super restrictive in the sense that you have to be mindful of not only your calories. So again, you kind of have to push everything into like a MyFitnessPal or track them on an app, and you have to be very mindful of your macronutrients, because if you're going too high on your carbohydrates, it's going to take you immediately out of that ketosis, which you've worked so hard to get into.
And now you're just defeating the whole purpose.
And you're exactly, right? So you have to be mindful, because again, it's one of those situations where you're not going to a birthday party and eating birthday cake anymore. Right. You have to say no, because it's going to completely throw you off. Yeah,
and you're exactly right. Like ketogenic diet, you're either in or out. Yeah. Right. So there's not like, there's very, very little room for goof ups. The variables have to be controlled. You have to have much more constants in your diet. And if you're winging your diet from day to day, ketogenic is very, very hard to maintain. Yeah. Now, I want to go back to some pros. We've had a lot of people, friends, family, clients, again, these studies, if you struggle with carbohydrate intake and you struggle with the chaos that carbs can do sometimes to our bodies on hormone response, insulin, water retention, that kind of stuff, go into a ketogenic diet and alleviating the problem that way. We've had great success with people on that side of the fence. Cool. That's another pro. More cons about the ketogenic diet.
So one major one I'll bring up is when we go off the ketogenic diet. So this would be again something that I would put out there as a warning before people do a ketogenic diet, is if you are going to do that and you want to re-implement carbohydrates into your diet and move away from that, if you don't find it's a sustainable lifestyle for you, we can't just jump back to what we were doing before. You will put on weight, and you will put it on very, very rapidly, almost double the rate that you took it off, and if not more. Yeah. Because again, your body is not used to that insulin, and when we're eating sugars all day long, again, it's going to have a dramatic effect. So when we're coming off the ketogenic diet, if we make that decision for ourselves, we have to do so in a very structured, organized, and a professional way. Yeah. Right? So that would be something that you definitely want to see like a nutritionist or dietitian to help re-implement this. Yeah. Phase it in now. It's just like when people quit smoking, right? there's a reason why that weight goes up, and it all comes down to hormones.
Yep.
So our hormones are going to be completely out of whack after we're doing keto diet. So if you just do it for 3 months, see outstanding results, and think, hey, now I can eat nachos, and now I can go out and have birthday cake, like I mentioned before,
Yep.
or even beer or something along those lines. Beer, wine, those also have to get cut out because those are carbohydrates as well.
Yep.
If you want to enjoy some of the quote unquote bad things in life, you're going to have to do so in a very, very mindful way.
Yeah,
so
very phased and structured, exactly you said. And remember, too, is that carbohydrates, they have calories behind them, but they absorb water rapidly and readily, and that's a part of their job. So when we do cut out carbohydrates, the initial weight loss might be pretty dramatic from if you can hit your calorie deficit. It'll allow you to lose body fat, but also, too, you're going to shed a lot of excess water. Yeah. And reverse of that, when you start reintroducing carbohydrates, and again at a fast rate, get ready, and you're going to swell, and you're going to retain water at a faster and longer rate. You have to be ready for it. Yeah. And again, you have to understand the process.
So I'm going to make one more point here. We just have to take a quick little pause just for some technical stuff, and then we'll be right back.
Come on.
Quick little fix there. No problem. We're back. So one last thing on the keto side of things before we jump into our next topic is basically just workout performance.
Big time.
Again, when we don't have, especially initially, if we don't have those carbohydrates, we're going to feel very sluggish. Our body will go through, again, that conversion basically from regular, like you said, to diesel, where we're not going to have a lot of energy. We're going to feel very sluggish. We're going to feel gross. Sometimes like headaches, nausea, digestive issues.
Yeah, it's like a withdrawal.
Digestive issues are huge, especially because we're dramatically dropping our fiber content.
Yep.
Something that people will argue is important or not, which is surprising. But we can go
we get another podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll definitely feel it for our workouts. Our workout performance will probably decrease, especially for the initial couple weeks. So it's tough to really, especially if people are looking for strength and power type movements, it's going to be very difficult to be on a keto diet while also doing those.
Right, especially if you're just introducing keto for the first time. You might want to just get to the gym. That's your main goal. Absolutely. Get to the gym, go through the motions, see what works, see what doesn't, but have your expectations in check. Yeah. Carbohydrates are a fantastic resource for quick, explosive energy. They're awesome. Yeah. They're great. And when your body has them, it performs very, very well on converting glucose into energy. And then as soon as your body doesn't have them, it's going to take time and energy to find a different energy source. So don't think that this is going to come around in an hour or two. Sometimes it could take days, if not up to a week or longer. So be mindful of that. Listen to your body and give it time.
For sure.
Give it time.
Now let's talk a little bit about the paleo diet, Paleolithic diet, baby.
Diets.
Dating back to our great ancestors that used to chase down dinosaurs or woolly mammoths or however far you want to go. But in a summary, the paleo diets, especially probably around the mid to late 2000s, early 2010s, was a super popular diet. We don't really hear about it too much anymore. I don't know about you, Jack, if you hear a ton about it.
It's lost its sexiness.
It's kind of lost that sexiness, but again, it's still out there, and it's still a viable nutrition source for people, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea behind it is basically, if it wasn't basically made on Earth,
if it wasn't available to us
if it's man-made, you're not eating it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's reducing, I believe it's dairy products. I think it's primarily dairy and grain and processed grains.
And even certain types of fruits and vegetables. And with paleo diet, we'll kind of quote unquote here, a paleo diet typically includes lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, foods that in the past could be obtained by hunting and gathering. That's the main thing, the Paleolithic. Yep. If it wasn't available to us, if it wasn't available, readily available, naturally available to us in like the hunter-gatherer caveman era, we should need it now.
Yeah. So
right off that analogy and comparison opens a huge bag of worms.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So there's things where you can go off on that, but let's just strictly go on the diet aspect.
For sure.
Pros and cons. I love the Paleolithic diet in that it makes it very, very simple, and you can't have any of that convenience processed crap. So if you really struggle with having that in your life, or just having a little bit of it and not a lot of it, having it just as a no factor helps. Okay. That helps. And it's eating good food.
Quality food goes dramatically up higher, right?
Yep.
The food that you're eating, it's going to be very low processed. It's going to be, again, more geared around like homemade meals.
Yep.
Than takeout meals, processed foods, anything along those lines, which is fantastic, right?
Yep.
So macronutrient wise, again, this is a great diet to kind of base things off of.
Totally.
Least, right? It has an amazing base to it.
Yes.
Which is awesome because you get all your macronutrients, you have options, I should say, for all of your macronutrients. You have options for all your micronutrient needs. Obviously, we'll go into cons in a couple seconds here. But there's a lot to it that's very, very beneficial, and it's a good base to kind of go off of, especially if we're not really structured dieting, but we still want to be mindful of our food. This is probably one of the better ones to go towards because it's not as extreme as others.
Right.
Again, it starts off very well, and it gives you a lot of energy, right? Because a lot of the foods that you're getting are going to be from fruits, plant sources, and animals.
Lean meats.
Very, very simple.
Fish. Yeah. No, there's what the pros about it too is that I like that it's not separating out an entire macronutrient. Like ketogenic is or whatever else kind of diets where it's high this, low that. Where this doesn't really matter the macronutrient ratios that you use as long as you have foods from these certain lists or these groups. Now that's a pro. Is if somebody doesn't want to track their calories to a certain extent or not track their macronutrients to a certain extent, they're just like, hey, give me a list of foods that I can have, and then I'll make it happen. Yeah. Some days I'll have higher this or lower that, and it gives them a nice little blend, and they can make certain recipes off it, not have to worry about hitting their calories or hitting their macros. They can kind of just keep it going from there. And I find that this is probably one of the easier diets not to have to go overboard or undereat on it. It allows you to kind of have that nice sustainability that, 2,000 and 2,500 calories a day for men, maybe a little bit less for women. And you get a lot of satisfaction and satiety from it. And, there's not a lot of restrictions and recipes or what you can or can't have.
And it's not really going to, it's going to be very difficult to overeat on this diet as well.
Yeah.
Unless you're just eating nothing but beef all the time.
And you're exactly right on that. And you're just having a ton of volume on that plan.
Exactly.
But there's not a lot of quick little ways to go over your calories or under your calories. If you just eat a nice sustainable diet, it's good to go on there. More pros?
Let me think here. No, I think we kind of nailed a lot of the pros. Like it's very straightforward with the paleo diet. It's really just kind of putting a name on what a lot of people would think, quote unquote, eating good is.
Yeah.
Right. When people are being mindful with the food that they're taking in, and they want to just kind of be like, oh, okay, I want to eat healthier. Well, number one, they're going to cut out bread. Apparently bread's the devil for all things. And we're going to cut out carbs, right? And carbs, quote unquote, for most people that haven't really looked into it too much, are going to be more grains, right? It's a little bit less rice.
It's vast majority, yeah.
It's primarily grains, though.
Yep.
That's where we cut things out, or reduce starches overall. But, let's go into some cons then. Pros-wise, it's pretty straightforward.
Right, and for the negatives, too, is that I wish they kind of just I want to eat real good food, right? But they're
it's a branded,
it's kind of branded on that is that they vilify certain foods, not macronutrients or types of calories or types of micros or macros or whatever, but they're villainizing entire foods, where there is a place and a time for dairy, depending on the person, right? And there is a time for grains, and there's a time for potatoes, and there's a time for other things that will give you just as much benefit as a lot of the foods on the paleo, but since it's not on the quote-unquote paleo list, it's a bad food.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's well, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with a potato, right? To a lot of people, their bodies digest it really well. It's a great source of vitamins and minerals. It's a great calorie source. It gives you lots of good energy. It has a little bit of fiber, a little bit of starch.
And it's a great make it into anything.
It's a basis of a French fry. Of course, it has to be good. Where again, they vilify a lot of foods, not types of diets, where there's not much merit behind it. And on the con aspect, again, we are really coming at this from a Western society, hunter-gatherer society, where this is kind of us and like the Anglo-Saxons and kind of like the Western Europe, that kind of stuff is like, this diet is very, very centric.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about the Paleolithic or the caveman or the hunter-gatherer age of any other society, we're talking South American or we're talking Slavic or we're talking Russian or Asian, like it's entirely different. So we're vilifying a lot of foods that
geographical.
Exactly.
Right? That's the
right.
That's
Yeah,
the
it's very white dude centric on this.
yeah.
Right. I'm trying to PC around this, but it's like very white dude made. Yeah, exactly. So, but we're vilifying a lot of way that their hunter-gatherer societies ate because it wasn't the way that we had it.
Exactly.
And the hunter-gatherer society and the way that they ate was all environment based. It's exactly what they had available.
Whatever's
to them
there, you eat it, right?
Whatever's outside, like go get it, right? And if you're going to have whale or buffalo or deer or elk or beaver or rabbits or whatever, it was really whatever is close to you, whatever on the migratory path you're on, and it didn't make you a better hunter-gatherer because you had different sources. It was if you could adapt to your environment and get the most out of that environment. So it's pretty white dude centric and saying like, hey, this is what is the best diet out there. But when they're trying to accomplish is like eat real food and the things that have been around and less processed and refined, and no GMOs and not like man-made foods.
Which is kind of strange because again, broccoli is like one of the biggest health foods out there, but that's a GMO.
Yeah,
like it's. That wasn't in existence before humans came along and decided to splice things together.
Yeah, we turned it was like the pug of the vegetable world. Yeah, we kind of made it whatever we wanted. And a bunch of things like that too is that they all have a place, and all farming isn't bad. And there's a lot of great crops and a lot of great vegetables and fruits and even alternatives and derivatives of that are great. They have great nutrient profiles, they're good calorie sources, energy sources, great for micronutrients, maybe even better on the environments in some cases, where there's nothing wrong with those, but it's not on the paleo list, so it's the devil, right? It's like, all right, well, come on, guys.
So vilification of food is obviously a big part.
That's a negative.
I would say reduction of dairy can also affect calcium intake, can dramatically affect and limit your protein intake as well, which can affect your grocery store bill, because if we're looking at eating nothing but meats, basically you're going to be in very tough for your protein content and making sure that you're getting it up because you have to cook all of this now. You have to prepare it. So your meals have to be a lot more prepared ahead of time rather than just kind of quick and easy on the go type things, right? So if you're busy in the morning, for example, and you don't have time to sit down and have, I don't know if eggs are on the list. I kind of forget. It's been a long time since I looked at it. But like eggs or egg whites or whatever it might be, I think it's just eggs, like whole eggs.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
But yeah, if we don't have time to do that, but we need to have a smoothie, right? Now it's much harder to get all the macronutrients you need into that smoothie, so you can't really do it on the go a lot, right? So and it's very tough that way. Yeah,
and it's weird because they say high in lean meats, especially grass-fed lean meats.
Yeah.
But
which are expensive.
And it's like certain lean meats where if you're not from like Canada or the US, these won't be readily available to you and at a price point that you can afford and in the quantities that you need in this.
I think you have to also avoid pork in that diet too.
Yes, because it's not considered a lean meats. And then I just brought up the list here for fish, and it's like the main suggestions, again, not of fish, it's salmon, mackerel, albacore, tuna, where it's like there's probably nothing wrong with having trout, or there's nothing wrong with having halibut or cod or something where it's different because it's not all, but it's different suggestions. So they're really choosy, really picking and choosing certain things in different aspects where I get what they're coming from, but there's probably a better way around it. But it's easier to follow a list of foods for some people, a beginner especially, where it's just pretty easy for them to take a look, can I or can't I? That helps some people, it hurts others. So you have to find out whether you are a list-based person, like an on-off kind of person like myself, or people that are just like, hey, I want freedom and flexibility. I'll just eat healthy. And then let me decide what healthy is, right? Where the Paleolithic diet is here's a small list of foods. Don't venture off here at all.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's counterintuitive to you and counterintuitive to the food chain. Where it's like, all right. pros and cons behind that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of the three main ones. Now, I guess with just being transparent and kind of going pros and cons and everything, right?
Yep.
One of the main ways that we usually drive clients towards is kind of the eating 5 times a day, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
let's hop into another one. Yeah.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about that. I know we're coming up on about an hour here, so should probably, time flies when we have pre-workout and we're just talking nutrition. Hey?
We would just rant like this anyways.
So hopefully people haven't tuned out yet, but we always have our longest episodes when it's me and you together, but that's fine. But let's go into like a quick little pros of why do we kind of push people towards more of a 5 times a day type nutrition program? And then what are some of the cons that come along with that as well?
Yeah, so
I think we touched base on a lot of the cons.
A lot of these things, yeah. Some of these diets have like calorie timing and nutrient timing based in their kind of fundamentals, like intermittent fasting and such. Others don't, where it's like you can just get it in whenever you want to. But there's a lot of people that thrive off certain timing of their calories, and others it doesn't change anything at all. And what we're talking about too is like when you're going to eat and how you should spread your meals out throughout the day. That's the main thing. If there's 24 hours in the day, if you got 2,000 calories in and your calorie goal was 2,000 calories, then you're game on. Now, are we talking about pros and cons here?
Yeah.
Or are we just talking about everything else?
Okay. Well, again, like we did with everything else here,
and
Jack,
just ranting. Yeah. Okay.
Let's kind of like again the reason why 5 times a day is kind of why people push towards is because that's kind of what the old mentality of meals were structured around.
3 meals, 2 snacks,
especially for I believe it's the 1940s during the war or after the war even. Kind of a family life where you'd sit down for breakfast.
Yep.
At work, you'd have a lunch break, so you'd be able to have your lunch.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day, you'd have your dinner. Right.
Yeah. It's not a physiological kind of like calendar.
It was
more of a societal calendar,
Yeah.
Right? We have lunch, we have dinner, we have breakfast, and we have our 2 little snacks. And that's how we based off our work environments. We based off our social environments. And with eating, it's very social and very societal. Like we base our food off of like social scenarios. And
well, we just came out of the COVID situation, right? And look how much just changed from the situation where it's like, hey, you can't go for drinks with your friends for a little bit, or you can't go for dinner with your family because restaurants are closed. So it just changes that dynamic.
Exactly. So a lot of people thrive off of controlled nutrient timing, where they want to break up their calories evenly throughout the day, where it's into 3 meals and 2 snacks, or 6 smaller meals a day. That kind of thing. And there's some people that thrive off that. And the pros of having the smaller grazing type calories is that for some people, it balances their hormones a little bit better. It kind of gives them a small little wave throughout the day. It gives them a slow release, sustainable energy throughout the day. And a lot of times people feel that, again, it's good for social scenarios. And it feels like they never have to avoid food. Yeah. And it's always kind of there. Now, there's not much science behind it. It's all lifestyle.
No, realistically,
right?
Again, the big thing for it is just like it curves off boredom.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because when we're bored, we eat anyways.
Yep.
It helps spread out your calories throughout the day. So then again, you're not eating one big meal at a time, feeling super bloated, and then moving on.
Yep.
And then it's giving you small bouts of energy throughout the day, right? And your body is digesting this food into energy. So then you're less likely to hit kind of that 3 o'clock wall, if you will.
You got it. Yeah, and I find too is that if I have the grazing diet going, I can have way more variety, right? I'm having 5 attempts at a meal, right, or snacks, so I can have different foods from all over the place. And when I'm in my intermittent fasting, I only get like 2 meals, so I have to be pretty picky on what I want. Now with my grazing things, I can have different snacks, I can have different things.
Lots of variety of food.
Exactly, a lot of variety in that way. So there's a lot of pros that, and it's a sociable diet.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can sit down with the kids in the morning before you go to school. You can have your lunch with your coworkers, and you can have dinner with your family again. You can have a little nighttime snack. It's a very sociable diet where you're not feeling restricted. And from there, those are the pros.
Yep. Cons.
Okay. Cons behind it is that it could do the exact opposite with hormones, depending on the person, and that it could cause your hormones to be erratic and nuts. Overproduction, more or less. Overproduction and underutilization. There could be that, and also gives you way more windows to overeat.
Yes, specifically with dinner. Right?
Exactly. Yep. Dinner and late night. right?
Especially those two, because again, we kind of have these smaller meals throughout the day, but then it's like all of a sudden we have this huge meal at the end of the day. So it's like, let's say typically it's like 500 calories for your breakfast, 250 for your morning snack, 500 for your lunch, 250 for there. And instead of the 500 calorie meal again,
2,000.
we're having like 1,000 calories, because it's like, hey, you know what, wifey or husband made, you know, this big rack of ribs, and of course we have too many, right? We always overindulge, we always make what we're doing. So it's like, now not only are you doing that, but you'll also have leftovers for lunch the next day, which is going to shoot those calories up as well. So it's kind of this trickle-down effect of like, you're having all this. And another negative is that, you know, for the most part, you're going to feel hungry a lot of the time. If you miss a meal, so let's go into this two ways. If you miss a meal, not only are you going to feel hungry, you're going to feel stressed out about it too.
And you're going to overeat usually at your next window.
To make up for it, right? So that's something that, especially for myself, that I've struggled with in the past. It's like, oh my God, I missed this meal. Like, today's shot. Like,
you're just fine.
So it's like, now I have to eat, I have to make up for this later on by eating like my my morning snack with my dinner. So now I'm having all these calories coming out at once. My digestive system's going to crap. I'm only able to absorb so much at a time. And then the rest is either going to go into the toilet or I'm going to convert it to body fat, right? So it gets that mentality into there quite a bit. Like, for example, this morning I skipped breakfast. Nowadays I feel fine. Normally I'd freak the hell out of it.
That's exactly it. When I first got into this, I felt like, you know, same thing as what we're always taught, you know, in school and society and whatever, like you have to hit breakfast. And I used to like, I can't work out without calories and I can't do this. And
exactly.
I've been fine. I have enough glucose to kill a small animal.
And it's all mental, right? So that stress comes more from your mindset than anything else. And that's really what nutrition comes down to, is just our mindset.
Big time. Another thing is that I find a negative with kind of that 3 meals, 2 snacks, the grazing, whatever you want to call it, is that we categorize foods and types of foods to that meal. That's a breakfast food. That's a lunch food. That's a dinner food.
Thank God you brought that up.
You can't have that for lunch. That's a dinner food. You can't have that for... It's like, come on now.
You just classify and categorize these things.
Exactly.
You know what I love doing? I love having breakfast
at dinner. I know.
Eggs, some sausage, you have a pancake or something. Exactly, right?
So it leads you that way. And two is that usually we like have our main carbohydrate intake with our breakfast foods, our cereals, or pancakes, or muffins, and the things that have been told to us that are breakfast foods usually aren't the best options for us. That's a negative, is that we categorize foods and kind of like really only have it at that time, where we might feel better off of it or have more enjoyment, or it could fill our lifestyle if we put it in a different meal. But again, we're kind of put into this box. Another con too, is I know you probably want to elaborate on that one more, is that the time it takes and the amount of effort, energy, and prepping that you have to do in the kitchen or meal prepping or whatever else, it takes a lot of time to prep 5 meals a day, especially for an individual, let alone a family. Right? So pros and cons, find out what works for you, but it is a massive time saver to reduce the amount of meals or feeding windows that you have throughout the day. Right?
Absolutely.
That's a con.
Absolutely, right? So again, like, just to be completely transparent, that's usually what we teach people how to eat, is have those 5 meals a day, because that's, again, societal norms. It's usually what works best for most people, but doesn't work best for everybody, right? So again, we want to be completely transparent. There's pros and cons to everything, right? It's all about how we go about it. So kind of going back, to kind of wrap things up, I guess, on this discussion, kind of going back to those universal truths again, right? Whether you're doing keto, whether you're doing paleo, intermittent fasting, doing the 5 meals a day, kind of calorie timing, whatever you're doing nutritionally, we always just want to make sure that we're doing it consistently, that we're staying diligent with it, and we're actually being, following the quote-unquote rules to what we're doing, right? And again, it's something that fits in our lifestyle. Because if it doesn't fit in our lifestyle, if none of these options really fit in our lifestyle full time, then why are we doing it to start with?
We're trying to try and go through a square peg.
It might be great to lose that quick 20 pounds in like a month or two, but the damage you end up doing long term, because you're going to end up putting that on. It's the same thing we could have talked about. Shake diets, during this.
Million
I don't
times.
even.
By the time this podcast comes out, there will be another diet.
Absolutely, right? So, maybe we'll have to do another one of these because, we can talk about shake diets. We can talk about meatless, right?
And
going
carnivore
into
the other way.
vegetarian and vegan. And we can talk about carnivore as well, right?
Yep.
So these are different things. There's so much out there. There's so much content. And that's why this podcast is an hour plus at this point.
Yep.
We're right on the hour mark, but there's just so much meat on this bone.
Yeah.
To kind of use a pun here. That we could go off of, right? Yeah. So, okay, universal truths.
Universal truths.
Again, Jack, let's wrap this up.
Three main tenets. If it allows you to hit your calorie goals, number one. If it allows you to eat real whole foods, number two. And if it's sustainable for you long term, those three. There's no name on that at all. If that diet can hit those 3 boxes, it's a win for you. And you might have 4 diets that hit all 3 of those for you, or you might have none. You got to keep finding one. And if it has to be, if you have to say no to one of those tenets, it's not going to work for you long term.
For sure. I guess one last little point I want to make, just again, popped into my head just right now. Try not to cross pollinate.
Yeah.
try not to like crossbreed. Don't do it to yourself more than anything.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do intermittent fasting where you're restricting how long you're eating, don't do keto at the same time, especially if you're just starting off. Pick one, stick with it to start with. You want to add in another version of a diet or another, platform in that sense, for lack of a better word. Do so in a mindful way. If you're going keto, do keto first, then go intermittent fasting and try that out.
Yeah.
But to do it all at once is overwhelming. It's going to be miserable. You're going to have a very shocked system, and long term, it's not going to be sustainable.
Right. And don't overcomplicate it. Usually, the simple diet works the best.
Yes, baby.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
And for the most part, again, you don't have to do any of these. You can just eat real food and hit your calorie goals and making sure that it's sustainable for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Find what works for you.
So like we said at the start of this, a lot of nutrition is just mindset. So make sure that you check out our previous podcasts on that. I'm sure we'll mention it a million more times on future podcasts. But we're going to wrap this up. So Jack, thank you very much for joining everybody. I know we said we weren't going to get too talkative, but here we are an hour later. Hopefully people are along with us for this ride. Again, guys, make sure that if you are checking out the podcast, whether it's your first time, your third time, or your 30th time, that you give us a quick subscribe, like us, rate us, share us, comments, send us to a friend. All of this information, you never know who it's going to really help. And that's really what we're here to do, is to give free information for people to get real results. And again, these are for real people. This isn't just for crazy nutbag athletes. This is for the everyday Joe Blow, like myself and Jack, who are lost in this fitness world, trying to find our way.
That's right.
So again, you can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Take a look at everything 360 Fitness, whether you're in the Sherwood Park or Red Deer area or not. We have online distance training available for people. We have in-person training. We have tons and tons of different options for people. Our amazing 6-week program, which I'm sure if you've seen this podcast, you're seeing a ton of those advertisements as well. Beat you over the head with it.
Because it works.
But again, it works. We get real people, real results. So find us on online, www.360fitness.ca. You can find us on Facebook, 360 Fitness Personal Training, both Red Deer and Sherwood Park. You can find us on Twitter at 360 Fitness RD and at 360 Fitness SP. You can find us on Instagram at 360 Fitness PT. That's actually Jack's main profile for himself as well. You can find 360 Fitness Sherwood Park at 360fitness.shpk. You can find yours truly on Instagram at 360. See, I told you, this is always the outro.
It's good,
at rshill_fitness. I share the crap out of 360 stuff. It's just me working out, to be honest.
It's very inspiring. It's pretty
good. A little bit of vanity there, but that's fine.
That's good.
The other ones, don't worry about those. Just the Instagram there. But until next time, guys, thanks so much for joining us. And make sure you get on the floor, utilize this information, and help yourself get those real results.
Thanks, guys.